What's up, everyone? You know what night it is. Wednesday night, Off-Centered with Dustin. I still call my station the Personal Finance Dad, even though every single guest we've had on for the last month has told me to rebrand Personal Finance Dad. And tonight's another very special show because we have the CEO and founder of Dibbs, Evan, on. And he's going to be talking about fractional ownership, NFTs, everything that I know very little about, but I know the whole hobby is moving towards that direction. So it's going to be a great show. We're going to answer your questions. We're going to really introduce Dibbs to you if you're not familiar with it, and at least go over some of the common questions as well. So got a lot to talk about. Hope you're ready, and y'all already know the drill. Welcome back. Now let's get to work. Let's bring on the guest that I have to add just because we decided to do this show together.
Oh,
whoa, what was that?
What's going on?
What's that? Like you're doing like a little
I was doing like the
workout?
like the Tonyromo. Well, you wouldn't know this because you don't watch sports, but Tonyromo, when he enters the booth, he like slides in. That was kind of like my slide in. I think it's Romo. Maybe it's, or is it Collinsworth? It's either Romo or
do you even watch sports? And what is it?
You're asking me that?
And so this is like the slide over your hood of your convertible, like or like slide into like over the hood and jump into your car. 80s like popular guy move.
That's a great song, by the way. What is it? Like get into my car or whatever the, you know.
It sounds bad. That sounds do you have candy?
Get out of my mind, get into my car, get out of my head, get into my car, something like that.
That sounds very bossy.
I don't think that would work today, though. I don't think that would be a pop hit.
You would be pepper sprayed if that actually happened. You'd be pepper sprayed before you're even done landing the last part of the line. So let's say hi to a couple of people here. Our guest is going to be on in a couple minutes. This might be a shorter show, might be about 45, 50 minutes. We will see. But let's say hi to some of you guys. Troy's Collectibles, who I've got to shout out Troy because Troy had the super chat last week asking about subgrades for SGC, who we showed his comment, and then Mike, who's a I was going to say not Mike, Michael Golden shared it with Chris, aka baseball card collector, investor, dealer. I was going to say Ken Golden, but Ken Golden was not watching the show to my knowledge. Michael Golden, thanks for doing that. And then baseball card collector, investor, dealer, shout out to you as well for reposting that part of the interview. Absolutely.
Chris is the man. Had a good time. I don't know if you might not even know this, but he came to Raleigh for a Raleigh card show, and I met him. He's a great dude.
So he acknowledged your existence. Is that why?
Look, don't be jealous. All right, that we're buds.
He didn't ignore you like everyone else.
Dude, I am holding your channel together by a string with this. This is your only content every week is me getting on here with you.
Hold on a second.
Be a little grateful.
All I need is constant junk slab PSA submission returns, and I'm fine.
So what Brad's done is he's got 10,000 cards coming back from PSA, and so he's breaking that up into 20 card PSA reveal videos, and he's going to do 500 of those, and all of them are going to be 2013 Peyton Manning base, and it's going to be like, oh man, another one.
Something. I mean, I have a second half that is slightly, I think, better than the first half. But regardless, all right. What's up with you? You've been buying cards. You went to the Culture Collision show. So
yep.
I know you did like a 9-part series on that. We're going to wait for our guest to arrive because he was on and then I think removed himself from the stream on accident. And
no,
so
I don't think that was an accident.
Hopefully he knows how to rejoin so we can plug him in when he's on StreamYard. But all right, tell us quickly about the Culture Collision show. How did it compare to your expectations? And, where do you think that they can improve next year? Because, I'm curious because you did like a 9-part series on it, but I'd rather just you summarize in 30 seconds.
I didn't do a 9-part series. No, I mean, it was a really good show. I thought that they did a good job. There is kind of some innovation with that. They've got a basketball hoop and a basketball tournament that they've got in there. And they've got sneakers and they've got comic books and they've got different stuff. But it was mainly sports cards. It was 90% sports cards. And then you had Yeezys and, some of that stuff. And then you had some graded comic books. But no, I thought it had a really good vibe to it. Friday was a little bit slow in my opinion. And then Saturday was quite a bit busier. And then I wasn't there on Sunday, so I'm not sure how it looked on Sunday, but It's driving distance for me about 6 hours. So it was, if I had spent a boatload of money or something, then maybe I'd feel a little bit differently. But just being that I was able to get in there with my family and stuff, and we had a good time. So I thought overall it was a good show. But compared to what, I guess would be kind of the question. The other side of that question. It wasn't like last year's national in Chicago. It wasn't that type of experience, in my opinion. I did get to see a lot of my hobby friends that were there, other content creators. I met viewership. That was really fun. That's always fun. So, I mean, from that standpoint, it was good. But even like when we were in Dallas last May, that was a busier show. But that was also because we didn't necessarily know if there was going to be a national, so that was a very busy Dallas show. So I don't know. But I'm kind of optimistic, positive anyway. I'm kind of, I find ways to enjoy myself. So, whereas some people
that doesn't sound good.
because you have a dirty mind, because you're a weirdo. But
actually, I didn't even go there, but man, now it sounds really bad. Okay, go on.
No, but I mean, like, I feel like I'd find a way to have a good time regardless, to where I'm going to find a silver lining in it. It was a good show.
Cool. I mean, I think what they were bringing to the table, because I didn't go, but just the different ideas, I hope that gets improved upon and keeps being added to shows. So it's not only about looking, buying, selling, trading, but there are other things that you go, I could watch this basketball tournament. There's going to be like this kind of, I was going to say exhibition. That sounds weird though. Exhibit, or this type of interaction. And so hopefully they bring that to Mint Collective. We'll talk to our guest, Evan, about that, because
one thing will
be there.
One thing I would add is they had space for more exhibitors. So that was one thing where, it was a huge room. It was probably a room the size of Dallas, but it wasn't full. I mean, they had room to be able to fill it with more, with more sponsors, with more exhibitors. And so, and I'm sure that they, worked hard to get as many exhibitors as possible. But as that show kind of gains traction, if that entire, building, if that whole thing was full, it would have been, I think, that much more cool. Not that there wasn't, I mean, there was a lot of tables. It was 300, 400 plus tables. I mean, it wasn't a small show, but it was a gigantic room, I guess is my point. They had more space for other stuff.
They got room to grow next year. So excited for that. Hopefully I'll be there as well. Regardless, let's bring on our guest because he doesn't have the entire hour. It's going to be about 40, 45 minutes. But here he is, Evan of Dibbs. What's up, man? How are you?
What's up, guys? How are you?
How's it going?
Thanks for joining us on Jonathan's birthday.
Yeah.
I know, right? I got this email. I set up a bot, so I get a warning when it's anybody's email at the company. And I realized that Jonathan scheduled this. He's actually still here, so God bless that guy.
Is he tipsy yet?
He's had a couple beers. Yeah.
Okay, I want to hear like a really loud crash in the background. I think that'd make great YouTube live stream content. Right there. Like a loud crash, maybe a light falling over, something like that. But
right.
Anyway,
the Logan Paul. Can you do something crazy just to get some added viewership?
Hey, there's no guarantees it won't happen. All right.
We'll see. I mean, if it hasn't happened at 40 minutes, we might just keep you a couple more, just if we feel like we're getting close. But tell us a bit about yourself, man. Who are you? And we'll get into Dibbs because I know some people are very familiar with the platform, others not so much. But who are you first of all?
Yeah, I mean, what level do we want to get into, right?
Where were you born? No, I'm kidding.
The born story is actually interesting.
Switch the camera view, Brad. It's in that weird side. Yeah, there we go.
There you go. Happy.
Thank you.
This cool setup. There's actually this cool Larry David and Leon picture up here, but we'll get to that later. But yeah, actually, dude, I was born in Hong Kong. I've lived around the world.
That's sweet.
Ended up in Colorado, Arizona, ultimately in California for high school. Did college down in Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, if you guys are familiar. And I worked at Intel, started a couple of companies, worked some startups, got into blockchain heavily in early 2017, right? Before everything got really crazy with the ICO boom, and was building a bunch of silly smart contracts for marketplaces and things of that nature very early on. Fell in love with it and went and joined Wax and Opskins, if you guys are familiar with those companies. Brought Tops, to be relevant to this audience, but brought Tops into that space. That was a huge catalyst, honestly, for what ended up being Dibbs. I was out there a bunch in New York, was kind of just back and inundated in the culture, had a big collection back at my parents' house. So I called my dad. I was like, hey, is that still exactly where I think it is? Got on a plane, went over there, started getting back into like actually trading and collecting cards again, and saw a massive gap and opportunity there. And yeah, it was relatively, hopefully that wasn't too long, but that's the backstory, and then started Dibbs.
So, okay, now here's the thing. I'm so far behind anything blockchain, anything crypto, anything NFT. So I know physical sports cards. I know you could buy them and sell them on different platforms. I know you could have vaults for different platforms, but I'd love to like get a really dumbed down introduction to what Dibbs is, just because I still can't definitively say, oh, Dibbs is this, eBay is that, Star Stock is this. Like Dibbs is still the one that I'm like, how do I best describe it? Because it's still very new in terms of all the different, terminology and ideas and combining blockchain with cards and all that kind of stuff. So what's your dumbed down answer to what Dibbs is and why people choose to use Dibbs?
Brad still has a fax machine. Go ahead.
Coming from iPhone 4 over there, which I think is iPhone 1.
It's the original. Why upgrade? It's the best. It's the original. All right, go ahead.
It's collectible at some point in time, man. So hold on to that iPhone 4. But yeah, I mean, like really, right? To take it like down to its like brass tacks and like the core of kind of where we're pretty different than I would say our contemporaries, and I would say even like just taking even a weirder kind of like leap with me and bear with me and just join me on this.
Is that Thomas?
No. I got we have 2 puppies in here running around right now.
Oh,
yeah, so what it is today, right, and where we've always wanted to take it is 2 different things. But in terms of what we are today, right, we take physical collectibles, we vault them, insure them, and we tokenize them, right? And so that tokenization element, I think, Brad, is maybe where like, why is that different, right? And there's the today version, and there's like the general like ethos of like where I see the world going with this particular stuff. Once things are tokenized, you can fractionalize them in really meaningful ways. There's a lot of like very, very interesting apparatuses around liquidity. You don't have to do this. There's ways to not have to set things up in such like a structured format. You can have a lot more free flowing, much more rapid trading in that ecosystem. But taking it, and that's like stage 1, right? I think like where this stuff becomes super interesting, right, is like, what can you do with that, right? Is you can take a physical collectible, right? You can scan it, you can collect all this metadata, create models. Like this stuff can be as tangible as, as possible without it being physically in your hand, right? And I think I think it generally is a pretty big issue, right? When you're fractionally, you take a physical item, you're on a digital app, and you fractionalize, you're starting to pull people away from, you're further and further removed from like the physical thing, right? Like the cards on the wall. I think with blockchain, you have the chance to like really bring that back, at least within the digital context, where you can have true like ownership over this thing. And I don't mean that just in like the sense of, hey, I can trade this with you. Like, no, I can do all sorts of crazy shit with this thing. Like I can, and there's tons of stuff that we've been building for 8-10 months now. And I think Brad, maybe we had shown you some stuff, but there's a ton of interesting apparatuses around how this thing can work on your phone on different social capacities in the metaverse, obviously, and that has its own, different kind of connotations that we can dive into or not dive into. But
yeah, let's dive into that in a little bit.
So I think there's going to be a world shortly here where like having these things stored, insured, and vaulted, and then having this digital thing that looks photorealistic down to like the littlest nuances of it, right? And I don't think people are doing a great job of it today, but that's where we're heading on it. And I think these things can live in a far, far different world online, right? And I don't want to give away like too much, but there is a ton of applications where these things you can build your own showcase room. It can be something that like actually represents you. They can be transferred freely across the world, right? I mean, in a second, right? And I think that's a valuable point to make too. Generally speaking, the card market as a whole is very US dominated, right? Like you're starting to see a ton of stuff starting to go to China and different, different geos, and people are getting interested across the world. But I think the general core trading is all here, right? I mean, not all, but it's largely here. And I think giving people access to that, right, in a meaningful way from the comfort of their phone where they're actually living day to day and minute to minute, I think has a very, very powerful powerful effect.
How do you see, so do you look at this, the way things are today is kind of like, AOL, dial up, to where people, it's brand new, the NFT stuff, especially with physical card collectors, you talk about NFTs and it's like, it's like you're, talking another language. No one's interested in it. I shouldn't say nobody, but there's a segment that likes NFTs and they like cards, but there is a lot of pushback from physical collectible folks. How would you, I guess, what would you say to them, and maybe you're not necessarily targeting everybody like that, but I mean, what would you say to, I guess, someone, that how this kind of intertwines with what they're doing or where you do see it going?
Yeah. So I think the skepticism is healthy, man. If you just look at the space, right? I've been in this space for a long time. In the beginning, it was super different, right? It really wasn't this like anybody could put something up and millions of dollars are generated over, 2 seconds and people are just flipping stuff. Like, I think those days are numbered, if you want my like honest opinion. Like, I think there are a ton of very interesting, like sophisticated product, like, projects that are genuinely trying to do something cool. There is a ton of crap out there. And like, it's just like, I get it, right? Like, I get why people are skeptical of a lot of this stuff. And frankly, I am, right? Like, you're not going to find me buying into like aping into a bunch of this stuff. It just isn't going to happen. That being said, right, when we got started with this, we never, that whole world hadn't come to fruition, right? Top Shot wasn't a thing. Like, there wasn't this whole boom. We love the underlying like concept and the technology that underlies it, right? And backing that with something that actually is there, that's real, that's had tangible, value, nostalgia, everything tied to it for, in the case of baseball cards, 100+ years, right? And like art, who knows, right? It's been going on for forever. But I think I get it, right? Like, I think to address those people, I'd be like, your skepticism's healthy. That would be my first thing to say. And I think, but don't let that like deter you, right? I think when people are running into certain gold rushes, like they just throw caution and logic to the wind, but that's going to get weeded out over time for all sorts of reasons. But I think the underlying concept of being able to own these things in a meaningful way, and with them online and on your phone and in the places you're going to be, the games you're going to be in, the worlds you're going to be in, the social media applications you're going to be in, that's powerful. And I think it has an incredible title transfer mechanism within it, right? It just fundamentally is a far better way of sending something to somebody else, at least from an ownership perspective. There's tons of stuff that nobody talks about that is really interesting, underpinning a lot of that technology that you can, grant access to tons of different things. There's all sorts of use cases, both economic and like, it's really a programmable computer underneath this thing, right? So you can have whatever you want on top of it and the code can execute all sorts of functions, right? So I think we're just scratching the surface there. I think there's a lot of junk. I do think physical back stuff is really interesting and a great gateway into it though.
Yeah, it's still something that's a bit abstract to me. But I think it's, just like anything else though, was the internet a fad? Was, people going from the BlackBerry to an iPhone a fad? Were all these other things? And just because there's a learning curve attached doesn't mean that you should ignore it. It's like, all right, there's a learning curve attached, but that's always been the way the world is. It's just, there's always going to be technology that starts from older technology and the desire to improve upon something. So to me, I'm fascinated. I just want I want you to explain what's like a example of what it's like to list or sell your card or buy it through Dibbs. Like, how is it different than buying through another platform or selling through another platform with all this other technology and the blockchain being involved? What is that like versus just I go on eBay or I go on MySlabs or somewhere and I buy and sell?
Yeah, totally. Right. I think it's a fair question. Right. So for us right now, like the primary apparatus of the application is like fractionally selling these things. Right. So I guess that then gets a little bit, narrows the field down a little bit into other competitors and people doing interesting stuff in the space. So to compare it to eBay would be tough, right? Like that piece, it's just not the same right now. Not to say that it won't be in the future in terms of like one-to-one single items, but right now it's fractional, right? And where things get more interesting, right, is it's real time. It's 24/7. It's constantly trading. There's very interesting, like, facially neutral and completely, mathematically based liquidity on algorithms that people can get in and out of cards for as little as $1, right? And it can happen instantly, and you can be collecting $1 of every Steph Curry card in a matter of seconds, right? So there's a lot of different things you can do there. There's ways you can bulk them together in a way that is very, very interesting if you've used the player collection feature on the platform. If you're getting into cards, you like Tom Brady, but you don't know the difference between the 5 different rookie cards that we have on the platform, right? And the grading systems, right? You start to get this very complex data matrix when you start to enter the card market. And like, I'm sure you've explored this, Brad, and you've gotten back into it, but like, it wasn't the same when I was a kid, right? And it's gotten a lot more complex with like all of the different brands, the parallels, the inserts, the refractors, all these different things. And then you have multiple grading agencies, right? If you start to kind of like compartmentalize all this, it's actually pretty complex. And I think simplifying that for people who want to get in on their favorite players and to collect their favorite players, we've made that very, very simple with like a single button. And so I think, those are kind of like the core tenets of what's going on today. I think the freedom of where you can take them, how you can utilize them outside of our platform is where, kind of the evolution's headed.
Awesome. And I'm seeing you guys in the chat. I don't think I'm ignoring you. I'm seeing the comments here. It's just want to keep Evan dialed in to explaining this. And I got to understand this myself because it's still a bit new for me. But this is a great question from Michael, who goes, what's the difference, or why choose Dibbs versus Collectible or Otis? So that's, I guess, a bit closer than eBay and MySlabs and some of the others. These are fractionalized companies, probably more traditional fractionalized. So like, what's the biggest competitive advantage, or the way to explain this is why people choose us, or a certain demographic would choose us versus these other fractionalized companies?
Yeah, I mean, I like the core, right? If we don't look at like inventory strategy, the kind of cards you have, like we have a far wider array of cards on the platform. And not to say these guys aren't doing a great job, dude. I think a lot of these people are doing really cool stuff. For us, right, it's a lot about how 24/7 and live, right? We process a ton of transactions on that platform, and it's a much more organic, like live experience, right? And that really is enabled by the blockchain piece, right? They're doing a Reg A plus security. You're actually crowdfunding a business, right? At the core of what's going on there, right? So doing a Reg A plus, it's a LLC with a board of directors. You are buying a share of the company essentially, right? So that is a different fundamental apparatus than like the NFT. And I think the differentiators start to like really multiply when this stuff can move freely across different platforms. You can do whatever you want with it. The other thing is we send these things back, right? We do this all the time. People aggregate more than 100%. It's not the same like voting system, although I do think there's benefits to that. And the other piece is we allow you to sell your cards, right? So instead of you being, a massive collector and they come reach out to you and you have a huge, they spin up a corp and put these things in, right? We actually have, we've had a few thousand requests now to sell cards on the platform. So it's like a very easy avenue for somebody who wants to be on the other side of it, not just buying it, to actually be able to take their collectibles, keep some percentage of that, and use the others, whatever they get to go collect more. So I think it's the only two-sided marketplace in the space. And then the speed and transaction velocity is far different.
What's the typical card on your site? I mean, do you have a lot of, vintage? Is it mostly modern or ultra modern? Is it a lot of, mostly basketball or baseball or football, or is it a mix? How would you kind of, and I'm sure there probably is a mix, but how would you, what's kind of the bread and butter, would you say?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think it's another piece, right? With Brad, I was trying to get to like the core kind of like infrastructure stuff. No, from a inventory perspective and what we have on the platform, it's definitely more skewed towards the more traded cards, right? Like, so we have Panini Prism Silvers versus like one of one, authentic, whatever brand we want to talk about. Like there's tons of, I would say, more obtainable cards for people. And that was part of kind of like the vision in the beginning. We also have a lot of like duplicates. So we can have 50 of these cards conceivably. I don't know if this one's numbered. I'm not seeing it, but you can have as many of them on there as you want. It actually creates a healthier market dynamic, and people can then buy out, one of 50 cards. So we have, I would say it's skewed modern versus vintage. We do have some vintage stuff on there, depending on your definition of vintage. Michael Jordan's probably not vintage to most, but we kind of go like, we'll say like 80s. I think there's maybe a few things, comic books from maybe the 70s. We've got Pokemon. We've got we're going into Yu-Gi-Oh! Magic are dropping this month. So yeah, I mean, it's a little bit more skewed towards our demographics. But not to say like, dude, I love vintage stuff. Like I would love to see more and more of it on the platform. This one goes live tomorrow. So this will be an interesting one to see.
Yeah, that's a first Riddler, right? And
I believe so based on introduced. Yeah.
They timed it up with the movie release. That's interesting.
Okay. In terms of the dollar amount I see here, where's that coming from exactly?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So,
and then also, Evan, on the back of that, how does it work for the seller? So, how do you come up with the number? And then does the seller give away, are they getting $10,000 of liquidity to use? And then, how does that work? Can you go through that?
Yeah. So if it's an existing pair, right? Like say you had another one of these Shaq cards, right? You could come to us and you could send us that card. We give you one token. You can do what you want with it, right? Like we don't have to determine that price. That price, once we do the drop, it is a full-fledged secondary market, right? So that price is determined by the people who have orders on the order book. So you can actually send that in. Now, in the case of a drop, right, which is like the one time that we actually have a set price for a set amount of time until it kicks into a live market, the drop price. So typically if it's consigned, the consigner ultimately gets to choose what that is. We have a ton of data sources that we aggregate across. I mean, we have card ladder data plugged into the application, right? We really want to give people as much data as we can provide. It's not that everybody's willing to share their data, and obviously certain sites are not going to. But we've tried to get as much sales data out there, give them links to go check out, the historical values of these things, all the kind of relevant details. But when we work with our consigners on a drop price, ultimately they have to choose, right? It's not my card. And so we provide like ranges and bandwidth and bands around that. But ultimately they have to choose that. And then we put that on there. And that's been happening much more recently, if like other people bringing, new people bringing cards to the platform. But if it's an existing market, man, you can send it in whenever you want. And it's up to you what you want to do with that.
Real quick, I see a couple pictures here of this. Does that mean that there were these other Shaq cards to compare to, or as examples, just because it's in the same listing, or are they all together somehow? Do you see what I'm saying? Like,
scroll down real quick. Scroll down just a little bit. Hold on. I'm trying to see. I can't view our screen very well. There's a number of cards. So this one is. Oh, this is a drop. Sorry, you're on drops. I was like, wait, is this a live market?
Yeah.
Right. The images. Say that again.
Yeah. So I just saw the 3 images here listed, but they're different cards. I wasn't sure if those were prior cards to compare to, or if they're all together in the drop or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, are they all being dropped together?
Yeah, this is 3 drops. So there's 3 different cards
in the same drop.
Yeah, so we do multi-card drops quite a bit.
Especially
when like the price point isn't outrageous. And when I say outrageous, I just mean if it's over, $5,000, you have to be, that can easily justify its own drop.
So if I have like 10 Patrick Mahomes silver.
What if you have 10 Kyler Murray base rookie card PSA 10? Just asking for a friend.
Yeah, just asking for a friend. If someone has like 15 base Prism Kyler Murray PSA 10s, and I can just throw them all together with like a drop of like $800. Could I do that? Could I like combine eight rookie cards?
Absolutely do it, right? We've done drops of like 10 things to 10 things bundled together.
What's the advantage?
But generally speaking, so it's actually really interesting. There's a huge advantage to it in terms of the health of a secondary market. So okay, you can imagine a market. You got 100 different owners of $1,000 card, right? Let's just use round numbers. So, okay, now you have a market that's $1,000 total, right? That is a lot harder to like stabilize and bring liquidity to than a market with 10 cards of the exact same value, same grade, same everything, right? So you actually add a far better chance of A, people being able to buy the card entirely off the platform, but B, it just creates a far more healthy secondary market dynamic in terms of like the order book, the amount of buyers and sellers, the amount of cash people can get in and out on. And so that piece is why it's really interesting. And so we've kind of built the secondary market in a way that, like, yeah, if you want to add another 10 to that Kyler Murray, collection that we already started with of 10, go for it, right? It actually makes things far, far more healthy.
So what about like in terms of drops, are there any drops that are mixed? As in, if I have like 8 different cards, but let's say they're all Tom Brady's, is there a way to do like a drop that's different Tom Brady cards, or does that, do you say like, all right, we should separate this based on either dollar amount or the card, or if it's like, look, I got 8 Tom Brady cards, they're worth $300 a piece. I don't know if it's worth it individually because it's such a small number, but altogether, does that make sense? Like, do you do drops of different cards?
Yeah, so it's interesting. We've actually, so if you go back, I don't know if you're on the application before, but like you can go click on Tom Brady, for instance, right? If you want to see like outside of the drop capacity, this is a very like well-defined like feature.
Like
markets, yeah, you can go see collections, right? There's Tom Brady right there. All right,
he's the man. Man, what a great dude.
Legend. So you can actually click buy. So if you buy that Tom Brady, if you want to put $100 buy order on that Tom Brady collection,
darn,
you would be getting. Hey man, we just caught you.
Wait, did it just buy for me somehow? No, just kidding.
Yeah, so you can buy in, and then it basically would proportionally spread it across the cards based on value. So with one click, you can buy proportionally one piece of the right percentage of each one of these cards based on the value of the card compared to the total collection.
So would it be the same dollar amount per card? If it was $100, would it be 20, 40, 60, 80, $20 a piece, or would it be based on?
No, it'd be skewed on value. I mean, you could do either, right? I think it was just like the preference was to do it this way. But it's technically no issue. And then getting back to your initial question of drops. So it becomes more interesting, less around like, you could absolutely do what you're saying, right, Brad? Like 10 different Tom Brady SKUs, right? Mm-hmm. Of whatever grade you have them in. You could absolutely do it as like one bundle, but there'd be no, like, you could actually just separate them all out, right? And they could all be dropped and people could buy into that. We're thinking about, we're looking at some different really interesting collections. Like, I don't want to use specific examples of what we're actually looking at to protect their privacy, but imagine you have an entire set, right? Like Topps 1952 set or something like that. The set itself together, if it's all graded the same grade, super interesting, super valuable, really hard to get. And so doing the sets as a drop, I think, is something that we're analyzing heavily. And then the question becomes, do you want to keep those as individual items once you bought into the drop and you have your percentage of each card? Or, do you want to have the collection itself always be intact and you're just owning that collection? I think that's a fundamental kind of like question that we want to figure out. But I think the sets are really interesting. I really like the concept of sets here. And then showcasing them is like a whole nother challenge, right? If you've got 100 cards in a set, you've got to give people either 100 different cards or a very meaningful way to showcase that. So I think there's considerations and trade-offs on both.
All right, man, that's a lot of information. So it's so many different possibilities now. I was going to ask, like, how often do people actually move their investments? I mean, like the average person. Is someone on here once a week, once every couple of weeks, or are you finding that most people are buying a part of it and maybe based on the market now, the sports card market, where it looks like only the super high end is moving up in price, except for, Formula One or PMGs of Marvel or certain things that are hot during a period, but it's not a year ago. It's not a year and a half ago where it was extremely volatile in all the major sports. Are you seeing a lot of daily, weekly activity with the movement once people buy, or are you seeing more people just like holding for, 3 months, 6 months, or even longer?
Yeah, I mean, so I can it would be like a bell curve, right? And like, not to give like this like obvious answer, but you have all types, right? Or all kinds of kinds here. The majority of our users, right? And like, if we look at like an actual, I don't know if you want to call it a Pareto chart, but you can even just look at like a distribution of how many people traded once, 5 to 10 times, and 100 plus times, right? They're relatively similar in terms of number of users. So we have these like different archetypes, right? There's the people who come in, they make one big purchase and they hold it for a long time, and they like that, right? And that's their thing. And then there are people who are avidly on there all day, 7 days a week, right? And we have that archetype as well. I would say, again, right, to put like the median or the average into it, right? I think it's skewed more towards, a handful of trades in a month, right? Versus 500 or more, right? That's a very specific type of user archetype. And then there's a lot of people that come in, make 1 or 2 or 3 buys, and that's the player they collect, man. It's, I'm the Steph guy and I want to that's my guy and I want to rock with them, right? And that was, the most traded card on the platform during his run up, right? And I think that's one piece is, and I don't think it's necessarily intelligent, right? Is like trying to especially with guys like Steph who are so established, it's so weird to see how much of a price delta you start to see on stuff just based on 20 games. But we do see a lot of that, right? Like player performance, the week to week with the NFL, day to day with the NBA, people start making, start collecting people based on what they're seeing live, I guess.
One question that came to mind, but I don't think there's going to be a good answer for it just because I bet it's it's more like based on the person selling. But have you found more people getting in on drops and getting the good deal when something drops? Or, because if I'm a seller, I'm like, I hope I can get the highest price, right? If I'm the buyer, I'm always looking for the lowest price, seller, always the highest price. But I'm always wondering, is there a trend in terms of usually when it drops, that's been when people are getting the better deal, or a lot of sellers want the top dollar, and then usually what happens is that a couple weeks later or a couple months later, that's when you can find the better deal. And I mean, maybe that's just a player by player thing, card by card, but that was just a question that popped into my mind because I'm always like, well, is there something I can know to look out for? Because if a drop is happening, maybe that's when the attention's the highest, but then 3 weeks later I can sneak in there, and if it's not fully sold, I can get a better deal.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that it's not a loaded question. It follows a lot of the market in general, right? It's one of those things where we provide that data. It's literally sitting in front of you. You can see the last 30 days, 90 days of sales, right? And so it does tend to trend based on, general kind of macro trends that are happening in the industry. It depends, right? I'll give you a good example though. Both have a Jason Dominguez orange auto out of 25.
Oh yeah, we didn't warn you not to not to look at the comments. We can look at it, but I'm just saying keep focused, and we can bring this up afterwards.
I think AP definitely brings up a good point here of just the valuations depending on which platform you're working on. I mean, this is a huge difference right here. if he's right, I mean that's a massive difference.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that's the scary thing with is we got to make sure the valuations are what we feel is fair, whether using Card Ladder or other market movers or some sort of data tool that we could look at it and make sense of it. And I remember that was a big question for the other fractional apps and platforms is we're talking about 50,000, 100,000, sometimes more on something, but where's that coming from if there's not too many prior sales, or it's a one of one? We have to really compare apples to apples, but if there's not a lot of sales, then we're kind of putting all these factors together. And so that's a great testimony right there from AP.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's an out of 25. There's probably not that much sales data. To be honest with you, I haven't looked at this exact card and the data of the last 30 or 90 days. But my assumption is based on the numbering, right, and the grades, probably very little sales data. So, I mean, you can look at that as a particularly interesting buying opportunity, right? If that's the card you're chasing. But how other people do it, right, is, I have insight into how a lot of it's done. For us, we've really tried to focus on things that we can find more relevant recent data, right? At least, when you can, right? One-of-ones, we don't have a ton of one-on-one stuff on the platform for that reason. I think if we get into, non-fractional stuff in the future, that becomes far more easy, simple and relevant. But yeah, I mean, in terms of how we price it, right? You can see the pricing information there before you buy the drop, right? It's sitting there, by and large. There's cases where there isn't enough data to do it. But that Jason Dominguez, that's a really interesting, case study. I hadn't seen the delta right there, but I wonder what Card Ladder sits on it. I don't know if they have data in there. So
yeah, I can check. We do want to be respectful of your time, but I know there's a lot coming up for Dibbs. I know you'll be at Mint Collective. So what's in the future? Let's just say the rest of this year. What are you excited about offering, and where can we learn more about Dibbs, not only online but in person? Are you guys going to be traveling to the different shows or participating online or in other areas?
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of, I'll hit your first question. Yeah, be at the Mint Collective, definitely be at in Atlantic City for the national. Be hitting a few other conferences in between. Of course, if anybody's, going to be there, feel free to come say hi. In terms of the product and like where things are going, right? Like we have been in the absolute lab for like 6 months. So I think there's a release cycle here that's coming out that's very, very, very exciting for me. It's very different than what's there today. And I think it's different than anything I've seen in quite some time. So, and not to like just be super cagey and jaded, cagey about that, but I think you're going to start to see a lot more interesting use cases of what you can do with this. Being able to really kind of like brand yourself, have your own ability to do all sorts of stuff on the platform through your own kind of lens, your own brand, and a lot more SKUs, a lot of different verticals coming into the system. So I think, sorry, my puppy is just screaming. So yeah, man, I think we'll keep in touch on this one, and I'll get you some. I'll try to get you some sneak peeks here in a little bit. But there's some very, very interesting stuff that probably doesn't seem obvious today. But excited for that, and yeah, I think we talked about events, so perfect.
Last question. This is a critical one for my co-host, Brad. With you being a technology blockchain guy, how do you see the future of online dating, and how can the blockchain help that?
My Hinge game is strong, but I could always use some help. And even though LA is just prime with potential.
Is there an element of online dating that will be attached to the Dibbs, the Dibbs app?
Yeah, I'm using the fact that I live in West Hollywood to help out anything missing from my profile, because it's swarming here. But yeah, I would love your take from a technological standpoint, and you're an LA guy.
Yeah, dude, this is actually a funny little caveat. When my VP of engineering and I, when we built our first company together, it was like a weekend project. Like it was like a couple days. We actually built this because I was giving him shit about his profile, right? And like he was all upset about like certain things. I was like, dude, that's because you look like a complete animal in this thing. Like, no, like let's fix this. And we ended up building like this crowdsourced like aggregator of it. And dude, the shit just like took off. Like people were, it ended up being like Reddit style like forum on like, hey, what should you do? And people were just like super willing to help. So that aside, I do think it's an interesting business opportunity for somebody else. Dibbs, man, hey, tons of girls are starting to get into this space, man. Bring the cards. Let's get those into social profiles.
Is there a way we can combine? If I could link my Dibbs profile to my Hinge, the way they have Spotify built in, like, hey, listen to my Spotify, check out my Spotify artist, check out my Dibbs collection. I mean, hey, you gotta dream big.
Brad, you know what? Dustin, I promise you, there is something similar to that coming.
Okay. Well, the funny thing is, if that's the case,
let me show you.
Okay, I'm excited, but if that's the case, I'm not listing my 10 base Kyler Murray PSA 10s. I'm not linking that up there. No one wants to see that. I'd lose respect among everyone. So definitely wanted to end on that note right there, because living in LA is pretty sweet in that regard, but the technology helps a ton. So Evan, appreciate your time, man. Guys, definitely check out Dibbs. Even if you don't fully understand it yet, this is the future. Fractionalized blockchain, this is coming. So might as well get familiar now and see if there are any cards or deals out there, and consider selling as well.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, guys.
Awesome. Enjoy the birthday celebrations.
Will do. I don't know what they're doing down there.
Awesome, man. I'll see you. Have a good one, man.
Right, see you guys.
Bye.
All right, man. Well, look, dude, it's 6:45. We said we'd end on 6:40 at a 45-minute mark. Definitely wanted to get to more comments that we did. I don't know what this is about. Dustin called you a cheap ass in this guy's Kenneth video. I don't even know what that is, but
yeah, Brad doesn't watch hobby content, so
dude,
I wasn't worried about him seeing it, but I'm okay.
I'm people watching. Watching on Sunset Boulevard, and there's some better content in real life on Sunset. I'm telling you that.
Yeah, but this is a true story, Brad. Did I say cheap? Or no, I said lazy. Actually,
lazy ass. Well, either one is true, so it doesn't really matter. There it is. And I'm totally, I mean, dude, I will say we didn't talk about the dating stuff earlier. It was more of a serious conversation, getting into a lot of technical stuff, things that I'm still very hazy on. But yeah, the girl I'm dating is in Vegas right now for work. So I won't see her until next week, which means it'll be another solo cheat meal. But things are good.
Let's back up a little bit. On your IG, you put something weird up there, and it was like, LA Wizards, help me with this problem I've got. What was that?
No, it was I got stung by a wasp on the bottom of my heel of my foot. And I was like, that
means something or whatever.
I mean, if you get crapped on by a bird, doesn't that mean something?
I don't know. Does it?
Yeah, it means like it's supposed to be good luck, but the irony is that, good luck is that you got crapped on by a bird, which sucks. But I was like, hey, hippy dippy LA friends, let me know what this is. And then some people actually responded with these texts, not texts, like pictures of books saying if the wasp is like this powerful feminine creature telling you to grab life by the horns. And I'm like, oh my God, there's actually something to it. So that was my interesting story of yesterday.
How many LA cults have you run into? Out there where it's like, come join our yoga class. And it's like, oh, we're burning we're going to burn this tree over here and talk to animals, or I don't know, like what's going on over there?
I think everything is considered a cult if you're not from here. And then if you're here long enough, it's just a normal group. It's like, oh, that's an Eventbrite group. That's a meetup group. That's a whatever. Right. But compared to pretty much the other 49 states, you're like, cult. Yeah.
You're like, wait, I thought this was the Scary Movie Club, not me actually entering into a scary movie.
Yeah, pretty much. But hey, girls are pretty cute here. I gotta say, man, that's it. And the sun is bright and the weather's great. So, guys, we're gonna end on that. Thanks so much for joining us. Definitely check out Dibbs if you're not familiar with it. Dustin and I will be back next week. I think we have Loot Box next week. That'll be fun. Loot Box TV. Juice from Loot Box. So that'll be a lot of fun. So join us there. And guys, have a great one. See you next week.
See you guys.